The hallway echoed with the faint squeak of worn-out shoes. Maria clutched her daughter's tiny hand as they stepped into the grand house. She had been hired to clean for a wealthy businessman, but babysitting wasn't an option she could afford, so she brought little Sophia along. "Stay close to me, sweetheart," Maria whispered, adjusting the bucket on her hip. From the living room came a boy's laughter. Ethan, only 6, was building towers of blocks. His father, Daniel, a widowed CEO, was buried in emails at the dining table. He barely looked up when Maria entered. But Ethan did. His bright eyes widened as he pointed with excitement. "Daddy, look, it's her." Daniel frowned. "Her?" Ethan rushed forward, tugging his father's sleeve. "The girl from the park. She gave me her sandwich when I was hungry that day." "That's her." Maria froze, her face flushing. She remembered. A few weeks earlier, she'd noticed a little boy sitting alone on a bench, stomach growling. Without hesitation, she'd shared the only sandwich she had packed for Sophia. She hadn't known who he was. Daniel's hand stilled on his laptop. He looked from his son to Maria, stunned. "You fed my boy?" Maria nodded quietly, embarrassed. "It was nothing. He just looked hungry." Daniel stared at her, but in his chest, something shifted. It wasn't nothing. To Ethan, it was everything. And in that moment, the walls between employer and employee began to crumble. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his usually sharp expression softening. He had built an empire by being tough, by keeping emotions locked away. But hearing his son's innocent words stirred something he hadn't felt in years: gratitude. Ethan, however, wasn't done. He darted toward Sophia, who stood half-hidden behind her mother's skirt. "Hi. Do you remember me?" he asked, eyes shining. Sophia hesitated, then nodded shyly. "You ate my sandwich." Ethan laughed, unbothered by the memory. It was the best sandwich ever. He grabbed a block from his pile and handed it to her. "Want to build with me?" Maria bent down quickly. "Sophia, no, we don't bother." But Daniel raised a hand gently. "It's all right. Let them play." Maria blinked. No employer had ever spoken to her that way before. Usually, she was invisible, the help, nothing more. Yet here she was, watching her daughter and the CEO's son sitting cross-legged on the carpet, building castles like lifelong friends. Daniel cleared his throat. "Why didn't you tell me? That you helped him?" Maria lowered her gaze. "Because kindness isn't something you announce. I just didn't want him to be hungry." Her words landed heavier than she realized. Daniel thought about all the meetings, the deals, the endless late nights chasing success. When had he last done something that pure, that simple? For a brief moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the children's laughter as they toppled their block tower. Daniel's heart softened. He knew then, this encounter wasn't coincidence. It was a reminder. A lesson from a stranger who had shown his son more compassion than most people in his polished, privileged world. Later that afternoon, Maria was on her knees scrubbing the marble floor, her daughter giggling in the background with Ethan. She worked quickly, determined not to overstay her welcome. But Daniel couldn't focus on his laptop anymore, his eyes kept drifting toward the two little ones. Ethan hadn't laughed this much in months. Since his mother passed, joy had felt like a stranger in their home. Yet here he was, rolling on the carpet, sharing crayons with a girl he'd just met. Daniel finally stood, walking over to Maria. "You don't have to finish all that today. I can call the service back later." Maria shook her head. "Please, let me. Every hour matters. Sophia needs food, school supplies. I can't risk losing the work." Her words struck him harder than he expected. She wasn't just cleaning his house, she was carrying her world on her shoulders. Just then, Ethan tugged his father's sleeve. "Daddy, can she come back tomorrow? Please?" His wide, hopeful eyes made it impossible to refuse. Daniel hesitated. This wasn't business, it was personal. But maybe that was exactly what they needed. "If your mom agrees," he said carefully, glancing at Maria. Maria's face flushed. "I don't want to impose. I'm here to work, not—" "But you already did more than work," Daniel interrupted softly. "You gave my son something money can't buy. You gave him kindness." Maria looked down, swallowing the lump in her throat. She hadn't expected gratitude, let alone from someone like him. As the children's laughter filled the room again, Daniel realized something profound. Sometimes, the people you least expect walk into your life, not to work for you, but to remind you what truly matters. The following week, Maria returned with Sophia. What she thought would be just another cleaning job slowly turned into something different. Ethan would wait by the window, bouncing with excitement whenever he spotted them walking up the driveway. One afternoon, as Maria dusted the shelves, she overheard Ethan whisper to his dad, "Daddy, it feels like I have a sister now." Her heart clenched. She tried to stay focused on her work, but Daniel caught her expression. He spoke quietly, almost apologetically. "He hasn't smiled like this in a long time." Maria nodded, unsure how to respond. She didn't want pity, nor did she expect friendship from someone like Daniel. Yet his sincerity was undeniable. That day, the children insisted on a picnic in the backyard. Daniel surprised Maria by joining them, setting aside his phone and emails. The four of them sat under the oak tree, sharing sandwiches and lemonade. Ethan and Sophia laughed so hard they fell over in the grass. Maria watched them, her chest tightening. She had spent years surviving, pushing forward without pause. But here, for the first time, she felt normal. Like a family. When Sophia leaned her head on Maria's shoulder and whispered, "Mommy, can we stay longer?" tears pricked her eyes. She quickly brushed them away, hoping no one noticed. But Daniel did. Something stirred deep inside him. He had everything, wealth, status, power, but the sound of his son's laughter and the sight of this struggling mother comforting her daughter awakened a truth he had buried. Money builds houses, he thought, but kindness builds homes. And in that moment, Daniel knew, this wasn't just about charity. This was about healing. For all of them. A few weeks later, Maria was finishing up in the kitchen when she heard Ethan call out, "Daddy, hurry." She peeked into the living room. Ethan was proudly holding a drawing he and Sophia had made. It showed 4 stick figures, Ethan, his dad, Sophia, and Maria. Above them, a big red heart. Daniel froze when he saw it. His son's innocent joy pierced him deeper than any business success ever had. "Is this us?" he asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Our family." Maria's breath caught. She wanted to correct him, to remind Ethan that she and Sophia didn't belong in their world. But before she could speak, Daniel turned to her with an expression she hadn't seen before, one of openness, vulnerability. "You've given us something money can't buy," he said quietly. "My son feels whole again. And I think, maybe I do too." Maria shook her head. "I don't deserve credit. I'm just doing what any mother would." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sometimes the smallest acts of love change everything. You showed me that." Just then, Sophia tugged Maria's hand. "Mommy, can we come back tomorrow?" Maria smiled through tears. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she felt seen, valued, not as the help, but as a person. Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I think tomorrow, and the day after that, you'll both be welcome here." For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It wasn't just sparkling floors or polished windows, it was laughter, kindness, and second chances filling the walls. And as Maria left that evening, she realized something simple yet profound. Sometimes, you don't step into a job. You step into a purpose.